All right, hey guys, I'm here with Greg Sherwin, who's a VP of Engineering and Information Technology at Singularity University. And he has 25 years experience in the technology field. In the last 20 years, he was focused on internet media and product development, and also has been a VP and SVP of multiple Silicon Valley startups, and also established business like CNET, who is today CBS Interactive, NBC Internet, TeeBeeDee, and also YOLO.com. Hello, Greg. How are things?
Good. Hola.
Hello. It's great to see you. And
Hey,
thank
it's
you
great
for
to
the
have you out here in
invitation.
San Francisco. It's always a pleasure to see Victor. So,
Awesome. Thank you, man. So, when did you move to SF, and how are things with you here?
I first moved to San Francisco for graduate school. I was working previously on satellite antennas, basically doing satellite communications, and wanted to get into bioengineering. And I had a program between UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco, a PhD program, and brought me out here. So that's how I first got exposed to the Bay Area some time ago, and I was really fell in love with the place. So I've been there pretty much ever since.
And what do you think are the biggest differences that SF experienced in this period?
Well, I can think of a couple. Like first, when I first moved here, actually it was only within a couple of months we had the 1989 Loma Prieta earthquake, which changed the city landscape quite significantly. And despite all the tragedy, because a lot of people lost their lives, but we saw the community come together, and I think one of the interesting things is it really established a better city future because they raised a lot of these freeways that were just blocking views. So the whole ferry building market area is just something that didn't exist before. It was just this ugly eyesore, and now we opened up the bay. And so the whole city got rid of freeways and started making it a little bit more livable. So that's been one of the big changes. Other big changes, of course, being I was probably one of the earlier adopters of working in sort of internet-based tech startups in San Francisco back in the mid-90s. But that's obviously become a big change. This used to be kind of a culture of financial services and lawyers, et cetera, and it's and a lot of blue-collar workers too. And that's obviously shifted to the tech side, which has had some good things and not so good things that have kind of changed a lot as well. So.
Very nice. And for you that don't know, Greg also loves coffee.
Oh yeah.
And we're here in a really nice place called Four Barrel. So how did you get started appreciating coffee? And also, we're gonna leave a link to your creations in the description, so people can check it out.
Sure.
Would you mind telling us a little bit about that?
So what started, I mean, it's kind of funny. I always liked coffee even as a kid, but I started getting serious about good coffee maybe around the turn of the millennium. And that was, it actually started because I gave up coffee, strangely enough. I was drinking too much office coffee, that like really rotten stuff that after a while you just convenient and your stomach just churns, and I said, enough. And then on a trip to Italy, I was like, what was I thinking? And what really inspired me was, when I was in Rome, there was a local rivalry between two different coffee places. There's one called Cafe Bar Il Eustachio, which is in one neighborhood. And a little bit further down, there's a place called Tazza d'Oro. And people would have loyalties on either side. And I was like, San Francisco's got a lot of great coffee history. There's got to be like good places. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of places that were talking about what's really good coffee. And so I've upped my game since then and roasting my own and doing things like that, but then also exploring the city. Started that coffeeratings.com website where I basically explored, well, let's empirically try to test out what are really good coffee places in the city.
Like a cheers.
All right, cheers. Salud.
Where do you drink coffee nowadays? If you're searching for a good cup of coffee, do you usually drink your own, or do you go somewhere?
You know what? I don't get out as much as I used to. Kind of like it was a great sort of exercise to kind of cover the city, see some new neighborhoods, explore corners, drink some really bad coffee in some strange corners. But I usually do a lot at home now, and I think it's just partly convenience and partly because I've grown to like what I can kind of do at home with my own roasting and stuff like that.
So how did you get involved with the tech industry, Greg?
Yeah, I think I've always been sort of a tech-minded person, even as a kid. I mean, I was really into like amateur astronomy and telescopes, and even played with like electronic circuit boards and kind of my early maker movement days. But what I did was more of an engineer by trade in electrical engineering, and everything that I did, and then I went to bioengineering. I realized that everything I was doing was affected by software, and so anything that I had to get done, I had involved getting software. It's like what Mark Andreessen says about software eating the world, and this was clear to me a long time ago. So I better get good at this because anything I want to do involves software. So that's what really got me more into the software. I mean, from technology, more into software as a kind of a key component of how I can help solve problems.
Very cool. And what do you do today at SU? Your main tasks?
Yeah, my role is really to kind of look out after the strategic investments we do in terms of what we buy and build for Singularity University's future in terms of ensuring it can kind of scale to its audiences, as well as making sure we could execute on what we have to build, as well as the things that we need to integrate. So it involves, vendor analysis, systems integration, architectural strategy, that sort of stuff.
And what are the industries and technologies that you think will have the most impact in changes regarding exponential differences that will come in the future?
There's probably a couple of areas I think I'm most looking to sort of see as sort of an exponential changes that I kind of see it. One is a growing ubiquity in computing in smaller scale. The fact that, I mean, it's not maybe flavors of it in the Internet of Things talk, but it's the idea that embedded devices that are everywhere, that are network connected, and what does that mean as we as a society have all that data or all that control, and also all those security challenges which come with that. Another area is just, it goes back to my bioengineering days, and looking at the technology now that people are getting into to be able to look at our genomes and basically looking at how we can kind of almost nanotechnology style, really like dice and splice our understanding of DNA and being able to kind of figure out how we can kind of control gene expressions and address things like some of our human, we'll call it of our health defects that we have, but also kind of create sort of enablement and the scarier parts for some people, which is when you get into like the superhuman, genetic model human beings, which has its own issues. So.
Yeah, and I can't wait for that to get started.
I'm sure we'll see them on the street when they come by. So.
Definitely, very nice. And for you that don't know, SU also is connected with several global grand challenges, right?
Yes.
In order to make the world a better place regarding water, food,
it drives
education.
a lot.
In your opinion, like what are the biggest drivers for you in that sense?
For me personally, I mean, we have a number of them, and I think what's the one thing I like about Singularity University is we look at not only these exponential technologies, but how they can be brought to bear to apply to some of the world's biggest challenges right now. And so some of them include things, like how do we get clean water in sub-Saharan Africa, or problems like that. But the ones that probably I'm most identified with probably include things like education, environment, surprisingly governance. Obviously, in our new modern world with communication and stuff, the old government models are, as we all are seeing, kind of are breaking down. And how do you think about, how do you prepare a world? How do you do like agile government, stuff like that? So that's another area as well. And also disaster resilience. I've been a long time Red Cross disaster volunteer, and that sort of is part of my DNA now.
So do you think the number of developers is a restriction for the exponential growth of technology-related industries here in the U.S.?
They are and they aren't. It's funny because immigration policy always gets this question every year: how many H-1B visas we have, et cetera, and the question of offshoring teams, et cetera. I've kind of come around myself to sort of a belief that there's talent all over the world, and I also tend to also think of it in global terms, and this is true certainly at Singularity University. Whereas I think if you had a bunch of privileged, college-educated computer software engineering students who are defining how to solve problems for not only just themselves but some elites, but also the rest of the world, you have a very biased viewpoint. And so for me, it's really important to have almost you're missing an opportunity for the perspective that you get from people who are developers who can contribute their own perspectives from around the world. So whether it's from places like Florianopolis, or it could be places like Singapore, and everybody, I think, to really kind of address global challenges, you kind of have to be inclusive of those communities and people who understand that well, as opposed to doing it from afar. And I think that is a hindrance for people here in the US and stuff to actually have a global impact, is how much do we actually understand the world through that. So.
Definitely. So not only connecting the developers, but also the people that have problems around the world,
Yeah,
right?
right.
To be able to have a more meaningful connection.
Exactly. And I think it's just, it's just the nature of the world now that I think we're all more connected than ever. We now have a lower barriers of entry and connectivity in terms of how we do video conferencing and how we can kind of break time zones down. There's still some challenges when I have to do like talks with people in India because of the 12 and a half hours, but for the most part, it's really kind of shrunk the world. And how do you then, I think it's kind of a missed opportunity if you don't find ways of taking advantage of that in that global viewpoint in terms of how you come up with solutions. So.
Awesome, very cool, and that's something that drives us at Cheesecake a lot, being able to connect the world.
We figured that out when we started working together.
It's awesome how we managed to get this right.
Yeah.
And how do you like working with Cheesecake?
Cheesecake's great. I love. Well, a couple of things. One is one of the things I really like about the Cheesecake team that I work with is they try to understand the bigger business problem and help trying to think about like more systemic business solutions and not just sort of being a technical cog in the wheel, right? So it's more than just understanding my sort of narrow role and how can I push some software because that's what I'm asked to do. There's a lot of good questioning about what are we trying to achieve and how we can do it, and then it creates opportunities for the Cheesecake team that I've worked with to kind of come up with some innovative ideas and be able to enhance things. So that's been a great thing as well. And another thing is you guys are always smiling. I don't know what it is, but it's like we cannot have like a video conference meeting with you guys but not coming away feeling good because it's like always a great mood. You guys are always like, such a positive force to be working with. So
that's great. Thank you very much for that, Craig. We also love working with you guys, and I hope we have many more coffees.
Absolutely.
In the future.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. See you soon.